After decades of conflict, the Galactic Coalition had finally defeated the Kralthax Empire, bringing an end to their reign of terror. The cost had been high. Entire worlds lay in ruins, and countless lives had been lost, but peace at last had been achieved. For Sergeant Ethan Drake, the end of the war brought little comfort. He had fought on the front lines for years, his body bearing the scars of countless battles. Now, as he stood in the dimly lit halls of a Kralthax stronghold, he felt only emptiness. The war had taken everything from him: his friends, his purpose, his sense of self. Drake, a voice called, snapping him out of his thoughts. He turned to see Captain Reyes approaching, a datapad in hand. "We've got orders to clear out the rest of the stronghold. Looks like the Kralthax left behind some assets." Ethan frowned. "Assets?" Reyes hesitated, then handed him the datapad. "Slaves, mostly political prisoners and war captives. The coalitions decided to distribute them among the soldiers as compensation." Ethan's stomach churned. Slavery had been outlawed in the Galactic Coalition for centuries, but the Kralthax had no such qualms. The idea of inheriting a slave made him sick to his core, but he knew better than to argue with orders. "Fine," he muttered, taking the datapad. "Where are they?" The slaves were kept in a series of cells deep within the stronghold. The air was damp and cold, and the walls were lined with rusted chains and faded bloodstains. Ethan's footsteps echoed as he made his way down the corridor, his heart heavy with dread. He stopped in front of a cell marked X 427 and entered the access code. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a figure huddled in the corner. She was unlike anyone Ethan had ever seen. Her skin was a deep, shimmering blue, and her hair cascaded down her back in waves of silver. Her eyes, a striking shade of violet, widened as she looked up at him, fear and defiance warring in her gaze. She was clad in tattered robes that did little to conceal her lithe, graceful form, and a collar of cold, unyielding metal encircled her neck. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. He had seen many alien species during his time in the war, but none had been so breathtaking. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice soft but firm. "Sergeant Ethan Drake," he replied, his tone gentle. "I'm here to take you out of this place." Her eyes narrowed. "And then what? Will you chain me to your bed? Force me to serve you like the others?" Ethan flinched at the accusation. "No, that's not. I'm not like them." She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she rose to her feet, her movements graceful despite her obvious exhaustion. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ethan," he said. "And yours?" "Lyra," she replied, "of the Valath Dominion." Ethan nodded. "Well, Lyra, I'm going to get you out of here. But first, we need to get rid of that collar." Removing the collar proved to be more difficult than Ethan had anticipated. It was designed to shock the wearer if tampered with, and Lyra winced in pain as Ethan worked to disable it. "Almost there," he muttered, his hand steady despite the tension in the air. Finally, with a soft click, the collar came loose. Lyra gasped as it fell to the floor, her hand instinctively going to her neck. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded. "Let's get out of here." Life aboard Ethan's ship was strange for both of them. Lyra was wary at first, her instincts honed by years of captivity. But Ethan was patient, giving her space and time to adjust. He provided her with clean clothes, warm meals, and a comfortable place to sleep, treating her with a kindness she had almost forgotten existed. As the days turned into weeks, Lyra began to open up. She told Ethan about her life before the war, her family, her home, and the day the Kralthax had taken everything from her. In turn, Ethan shared his own story, his voice heavy with regret as he spoke of the friends he had lost and the guilt that haunted him. "You're not what I expected," Lyra admitted one evening as they sat in the ship's small common area. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? A monster, she said bluntly. Someone who would use me for their own gain. Ethan shook his head. I'm not like that. I fought in this war to protect people, not to hurt them. Lyra studied him for a moment, her violet eyes searching his. You're a good man, Ethan Drake. Don't let this war take that from you. Their journey took them to the edge of Coalition space, where Ethan planned to drop Lyra off at a refugee center. But as they approached the planet, Lyra hesitated. I don't want to leave, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? Lyra turned to him, her expression earnest. I want to stay with you, not as a slave, but as a partner. You've given me my freedom, Ethan. Let me choose to stay. Ethan's heart raced. He had grown to care for Lyra in ways he hadn't expected, but the idea of her staying with him, of her choosing him, was almost too much to process. Are you sure? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. Lyra nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. In the months that followed, Ethan and Lyra became inseparable. They traveled the galaxy together, helping those affected by the war and fighting to rebuild what had been lost. Lyra's knowledge of alien cultures and languages proved invaluable, and her presence brought a sense of purpose back into Ethan's life. One day, as they stood on the observation deck of their ship, watching the stars streak by, Lyra turned to Ethan with a smile. Do you ever think about the future? She asked. Ethan nodded. All the time. What about you? Lyra's smile widened. I think about a world where no one has to live in fear, where people like us can find peace and happiness. Ethan reached for her hand, his heart swelling with hope. Then let's make that world together. Epilogue. Years later, Ethan and Lyra settled on a small, peaceful planet on the edge of Coalition space. They built a home together, a place where they could finally lay down their weapons and live in peace. Lyra never forgot the kindness Ethan had shown her, and Ethan never stopped marveling at the strength and resilience of the woman who had chosen to stand by his side. Together, they proved that even in the aftermath of war, there was still hope, and that sometimes the greatest victories were the ones fought not with weapons, but with love and compassion.